G'day guys, and welcome to part 1 of this underground railroad train track tutorial. This is the finished result that you can see right here. I'm breaking this tutorial up into 2 parts. I originally was going to combine it all into one big long tutorial, but I figured that would be way too extensive and cumbersome. So I'm going to drag it out over 2 tutorials just so I can cover everything properly. But yeah, this is the finished result. So I modeled this off a whole bunch of reference images which I found off Flickr and things like that to try and get a really authentic looking subway feel. So that's what we're going to be doing. Now this is the finished scene in Blender that you can see right here. Now it looks quite complex, but believe it or not, it is fairly simple to put together. I wouldn't be doing a tutorial on it if it wasn't, that simple, because I wouldn't have time to. But yeah, basically all we're going to be doing is modeling a small segment, so one small segment of the railroad track, for example, and then by using arrays, which I'm going to show you how to do, and a curve modifier as well, it's going to be duplicating that segment along a track, which we can then bend and twist however we want. So, and then basically all the other elements are completed in the same fashion. And it's a really easy, simple way to create a rather complex, advanced looking scene. So this tutorial, this part 1 of this tutorial, will be focusing entirely on the modeling side of things, and then part 2 will be focused more on the lighting and the materials. So as well as that, we're also in part 2 going to get into the compositing as well. So how to do that atmospheric fall off effect, the light glare glowing effect, bit of color balance, lens distortion, stuff like that. So hopefully going to have a bit of fun, and hopefully you'll pick up a few things which you can use in a variety of different things for any future projects that you create. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and open up a new scene in Blender. Now, before we get started, because this is the start of a rather big project, it's highly recommended, or I highly recommend it of you, to just spend 5 minutes having a look at some reference photos. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of photos here which I found off Flickr myself. This is a photo which I, my scene was heavily modeled off, which is, I don't even think it's actually a train kind of subway. Apparently, according to this description, it was used as a Nazi tunnel shelter. I don't really know what that means, but I really like the feel of it. Kind of like a really nice, clean, but grungy looking effect. And then you've got these lights that go all the way down, and then it's kind of got this foggy kind of atmospheric feel to it. It looks quite eerie, but it also looks, quite eye-catching. So I like that. And then I've found a variety of other photos. So this is one you can see is a lot more complex. It's got a lot more things going on, pipes and cables and all along the top, and there's all these tracks and gravel and things like that. So you can go for that sort of scene if you like. And then there's other ones here. This is one that I think is being built, but you can see it's got like a nice, really clean looking it doesn't have too much stuff all over the walls. And then there's this one here from Paris, which is really dark and freaky looking. Actually, there's I think a documentary which I'll link you to, which is really cool. I'll put a link to it underneath this video if you want to check it out. But it's some guys who go and explore the Paris underground railroad system, and it's really eerie actually when you have a look at it. It's kind of freaky, but yeah, quite cool as well. Anyway, that's another story. So we've had a look at some reference photos. Now we sort of got a general idea what we want to create. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the tunnel. So I'm going to delete this default cube here, and I'm going to replace it with a cylinder. Now in the toolbar here, you can see we can change the options for this cylinder. So first thing, I'm going to uncheck cap ends so that it's a hollow cylinder. And I'm going to turn up the number of vertices from 32 to 64. Like so. And that's just so it's a lot more smoother and you don't have any visible choppy artifacts showing up. Okay, so with that done now, I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees so that it's flat like that. And if you go back to the toolbar, we need to turn on smooth shading so we don't have that jaggedy effect. And I also need to flip the normals. If you don't know what normals are, if I just turn on normals there so you can see them, normals are basically the direction in which the faces are facing. So with these blue lines, it shows that the normals are facing outwards, which means that it would render fine if the camera was, from this angle, for example. But if the camera was from inside the tunnel, which is where it's going to be, then the normals are facing in the wrong direction. So that could cause problems later when you add textures and the lighting doesn't work properly. So we need to flip the normals. So in the toolbar, just go here under normals and click flip direction. And you can see all those blue lines are now facing inwards. You can check which way they're facing, by the way, if you press N to bring up this little toolbar thing here, and then just select mesh display normals. But anyway, okay, simple. Now what I want to do is I want to remove a segment of this tunnel right here. So just about that much right there. Maybe a little bit more. About there, I think should be fine. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, like that. Yeah, make sure you select the other side as well. Okay. And so we're going to select that and then remove it. Okay, so it's now cut off slightly. And now what I want to do is go into edit mode and move all the vertices up, keeping the origin point centered right there. Okay, very important. Keep everything centered. And I'm going to position it just so that it's slightly underneath that red line. So underneath the grid floor. Okay. Now I'm going to add a plane. And keeping it again exactly on the center line there, I'm going to scale it along the x-axis just so it meets up with the edge right there. Okay, pretty neat. And yeah, so now we've got the floor and the tunnel. Very simple. Now, if you wanted to create, a really long-looking tunnel, what most people would do, or at least before this feature was added, is they would just extrude this tunnel out. And although that works fine if it was a straight tunnel and you didn't have much detail going on or whatever, if you want to add some like a curve in it, or kind of like a curve, then it would be a problem, because you then have to go and move the vertices around or whatever. And so it's just it can be a little bit cumbersome. So to fix that, there's a feature added called the array modifier. So if you go to modifiers, then select array. Now what the array will do is it'll add, basically, it'll duplicate that segment as many times as you say, and it'll place it end on end. Now currently it's doing it along the x-axis, so I'm going to change the x-axis from 1 to 0, and then set the y-axis to 1. Okay, and now it's going upwards. You need to make sure you get the rotation right. So if you get this problem, just hit Control A and then select Apply Rotation, and it should now be on the right path. So I'm going to do the same with this plane right here. So turn on Array, make it like that, and I'm going to make it, let's go 40. Okay, so it's quite long, and I'm going to do the same with the tunnel as well. 40. Okay, now the cool thing about this is I can show you another feature now, which is called the curve modifier. Okay, now the curve modifier will allow you to make any object follow the path of a curve which you put in. So to demonstrate that, we first need to put in a curve. So I'm going to go Shift A, select curve, and you've got a number of different curves that you can choose here. I always choose path just because it gives me a straight looking curve to begin with, doesn't have a kink in it or anything. I'm now going to rotate that by 90 degrees. And going into edit mode, I'm going to move all of those anchor points up so that the bottom anchor point is in line with that origin point right there. Okay, now I'm going to scale this up just so that it's the length of the railroad, like so. Okay. Now I'm going to select my tunnel here, and I'm going to go Add Modifier, select Curve, okay. Now this curve here will ask you for the name of the curve, and you can see we've only got one curve there, so if we select NURBS Path, then you should see the tunnel move just very slightly, and I'm going to do the same with this plane right here. Select Curve, NURBS Path, and now it doesn't look like anything has changed. However, what we can do now is if we go into edit mode with this curve here selected, I can now move one of these points like that, and you can see that the tunnel and the plane all move in line with the curve. So this is how you can, create a roller coaster scene or a mine shaft or whatever, and have the camera follow along this really complex route, because you've modeled one small segment, then had it use a raise and then a curve modifier to just curve it and just follow it around everywhere. So it's a really quick and easy way to create a rather complex looking scene. So you can create however, what type of curve you want. I'm going to make this just slightly lower like that. Maybe make that about there. Move that up a bit, like so. Okay, so it's now got a slight kink to it. Now what I want to do is I'm going to position the camera just so it's inside this tunnel here. So I'm going to grab my camera, and then I'm going to hit, in the front view now, I'm going to hit Control-Alt number pad 0, and I'll just move it downwards. Okay. Oh, I didn't do it exactly where I want it to. Okay, that's alright. Okay, just position it about there. Okay, should be fine. Okay, so now we've set up the basic tunnel and the floor. Now we can get into the complex stuff, and that is modeling the rail and those kind of, things that are going to follow the tunnel around. So I'm going to jump back to the internet now, and I'm just going to go to Google, typing in train track section, just so we can have a look at how an actual train track looks. So this is giving us kind of a cross-section kind of look at what makes up a railroad track. So that's really handy, that picture right there. So you can see it's rather simple. It's got just like a small base there, then this kind of knobbly bit on top, and then this kind of mid-thin section right there. So rather simple. So to create that, what I'm going to do is go to a new layer here, and I'm going to add a plane like that. And where is it? Where am I looking at? Okay, there we go. I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. Okay. And I'm going to remove the face from it. Okay. So, remove the face, only faces. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to... Actually, maybe I should have kept that face. All right. Just so we can add these loop cuts easily. I'm going to add 2 loop cuts there, like that. And I'm going to create another 2 loop cuts within it. So let's go Control-R, loop cut. Like that. And I'm going to scale these 2 points in there like that. Okay. And I'm also going to just move all of these vertices here just to the right hand side of that origin point. And I'm going to add a mirror modifier. Okay. That's just so that it saves us time having to model things twice. Turn on clipping and then just make sure that they're touching like so. And I'm going to move these vertices here inwards like that. And move these ones up just so it's a smaller base. And I think that is pretty close to what is right there. Maybe this is a slightly more out. Okay. Alright, cool. Alright, so now we've got the basic look of it. I'm going to remove the vertices from that, which is what I did at the beginning, but I messed up. So I'm just going to select only faces. I'm just going to remove all these edges here. Actually, I might as well, remove all these vertices there too. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just going into edit mode now. I'm going to extrude this shape outwards to about there. Okay. And now I'm keeping it again on that origin line there. And I'm just going to, into edit mode. Just going to move all the vertices just so it's sort of in the center there. And then scale it outwards like that. So this is going to be one segment, and right here in the middle of this segment of this railroad track, I'm going to add a clamp, okay? So I'm going to jump over to the internet just to show you what the railroad clamp does. So the clamp basically is just bolting the actual track to the ground. So if we have a look at these pictures here, you can see there's various different types of clamps that gets the job done. But it's essentially, it's got 2 bolts in it and it keeps it down on the track. You've also got these fancy ones here, which I found are used more for indoor type railroads, so subways and things like that. So that's the one we're going to try to model, this one right here. So going back to the Blender scene now. Blender scene, there we go. Going into edit mode, so we've still got the same object selected. I'm going to add a cube, okay, and I'm going to scale it down to about there. All right, and gonna move it out a bit. So the first part is going to be modeling this sort of bottom segment right there, okay? So I'm going to extrude or position these vertices there a little bit outwards. And let's see, grab that entire cube and squash it down a bit. So this is going to be where the track is actually sitting on, okay? And I'm going to create a cut here and a cut here. and I'm going to extrude that cut upwards. So we should have a piece that's looking like this at the moment, okay? I'm now going to just grab these, just move them out a little bit, and what I want to do is create 2 bolts right there. Now, don't need to go into too much detail with the bolts because, this segment's going to be, duplicated, on an array system and, hundreds of times throughout the scene, so you don't want to go into too much detail. So I'm going to add a circle, change the number of vertices of that to 5, so it's this kind of shape. Turn on fill, like that, and make sure the mirror modifier is set to clipping off before you try and scale it downwards, otherwise you'll have it get stuck on that middle line there. Okay. Position it about there and then extrude it downwards. Okay. And then with that then selected, I'm going to move that across there. Rotate them slightly just so they're not identical to each other. Alright, so it's looking fairly good so far. The next segment that we're going to do is this kind of curved, kind of spirally thing, which is going to be clamping it down onto the tracks. So to create that, again, you're not going to be able to see this in too much detail in the final render, but I'm just going to create a plane like that. Position it about there. And I'm going to extrude it there and extrude it there. Okay, so this is just really roughly just creating the shape of this thing, and then I'm just going to grab these vertices, move them in. I know there's a new tool in 2.57 which allows you to do instantly create these faces for you, but I'm not going to use it for now because it's pretty simple. Whoa, went into fly mode there. Don't do that. Okay, alright, so that's the basic clamp. I might add a little bit more detail there. Okay, just to break it up slightly. Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so that's the clamp pretty much finished now. So now we can go back to our scene here. Back to the scene. I'm going to scale it down so it's not enormous, of course, and position it about there, just so it's flat with the plane. And now I'm going to actually enable or click apply for this mirror. Okay, so now all that is one solid object, and I'm going to move it across to the on the right hand side of that origin point, and I'm going to turn on mirror again, and what this will do is it'll create a duplicate track right there. So now if I add an array modifier, turn it onto the y-axis as we did before, make sure the rotation is correct, like so. Then we can now turn up the number of counts for this array, and it should all work. I know some of you are probably wondering why I don't just go fixed length and choose fit curve, because you can do that, make it so that it follows the length of that entire curve there. I've always found that to be really troublesome, and it never really follows the exact amount of the curve, like to do with the size of the curve, etc. So I just, for the sake of keeping it easy, I'm just going to, just do it by hand, just by selecting the number of counts there. But, you can do whatever you like. So now I'm going to make it follow that curve, so adding a curve modifier now, and then select nurbs path. And there you go, you can see that it's now following the curve. I'm just going to move part of this curve up a bit, just so we can still see everything. Maybe grab these parts here, move them up slightly. Okay, cool. Alright, so I might just move this camera forward a little bit, just so that it's in line, like so. Cool. Now, there's one other thing to note, and that's that the railroads generally have what's called a third rail. I don't know the purpose of it, but I was watching that documentary, and they were saying that if you touch the third rail, then you die pretty quickly, because I think that's kind of like where the electrical volts are grounded or whatever. I'm just talking, I really have no idea, but basically there is a third rail, so kind of a duplicate of one of these that just runs alongside one of the tracks. So I'm just going to duplicate this entire rail here, move it to about there, and turn off mirror. Okay, so we've now, basically got that. I want to make sure this origin point is exactly where it should be, so I'm just going to Make sure it goes to the right point. Okay, origin point is in line now. And just to break it up so it doesn't look identical to the railroad, I'm going to scale this down a lot. Maybe change the shape of it slightly. So it's like that. These points can go inwards a little bit. Alright, cool. And make sure it's flat with the plane, like so. Oh, and also just scale that out a bit as well. Okay, so now we've got that third rail. So now what I'm going to create is the pipes. So if we go back to our reference photos over here, you can see you've got these pipes running along the sides of the walls of this subway. So I'm assuming the pipes have cables and other things in them. Pretty much every photo has some kind of pipes running along the sides of it. So I'm going to create that now. So let's go back here, and this is going to be pretty much, you know, doing the same sort of methods that we did. So adding a cylinder, I'm going to give it, let's go 20 vertices, no capped ends. I'm going to rotate it like so, scale it downwards, and extrude it out about there. Okay, turn on smooth shading for this. Turn on array, like so. Turn the count of that all the way up to whatever is necessary, something like that. Give it a curve, nurbs path, and there we go. So I want to add obviously a little bit more detail to this pipe, so let me just, I'll scale it down for start with. Extrude it about there. So for one of these endpoints here, I'm going to extrude it like so. Hoping you can quickly see how I did that. Just, yeah, extruding like that. And make sure you select merge so that they're all merging together, those endpoints when the arrays meet. And also turn on edge split so that you don't have that weird kind of effect that was there before. Okay, and I also want to make it so it's bolted to the wall a little bit. So easy way to do that. If I grab these vertices here, and then if I press Shift D, and then just move it to about there, extrude it out a bit, then extrude it that way, and then if I grab these vertices right here, like that, and then just extrude it that way, or just move them that way, like that. Turn on smooth shading again, then it's kind of created that bracket which is bolting it to the wall there. Now if I want to create an exact replica of that so that it's on the other side as well, what I can do is with that cylinder selected, if I just, with this track selected, so you can see where the origin point of that track is there, directly on that center line. So if I hit Shift S, then select cursor to selected, and then select my pipe object there, then hit Control Shift Alt C, then select origin to 3D cursor. If I now add a mirror modifier, mirror, then it's automatically created one on the opposite side. Now make sure that the mirror modifier is above the curve, like that, so that it's, yeah, otherwise you'll have it kind of, that kind of problem happening. So yeah, make sure it's above the curve. Okay, cool. All right, so, oh yeah, with the edge split modifier, make sure you set it to 60 or 80, whatever, just so you don't have any kind of weird artifacts showing. I think that's, let me just have a look, array, mirror, curve. Maybe you have to move that edge split up a little bit. Okay, well that's alright. Anyway, let's go ahead and save our scene now before something happens. Okay, so that's saved. Alright, so now what I'm going to create, I might just move that down again. Anyway, it's not perfect, but you know, you get the gist of it. So I'm going to create some more pipes along the side there. So going back to the reference photos, if we have a look specifically at this one here, you can see we've got these kind of like a series of 6 really small lines, which are just going along both edges of this tunnel here, which I presume are the power for those little lamps that you can see there on the side there. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually model the one of those fine lines. So let's jump over to another new layer now, and I'm going to add a circle. Now this circle needs to be very low res because there's going to be actually 6 of them, which are extruding across, the rest of the scene. So we're going to give it a number of vertices count of 8, okay? And make sure fill is unselected, okay, just so it's like that. I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees, scale it downwards. And now what I'm going to do, go into edit mode, and I'm going to duplicate that, and so that there's 6 of them like this, okay? They don't have to be, the same distance apart. They can be a little bit random because wires are like that. And now I'm going to select all of them, and then I can just extrude them like so, okay? Now I want to create one there on that kind of grid point there, another one here, and another one here, and another one here. And now what I'm going to do is just randomize these points right here, because what I want to make it look like is there's a bracket holding these ones up, a bracket here, and a bracket here. So I want to make these ones that are these vertices here and these vertices here just slightly sagging a little bit, just to add a little bit of random variation to it. So some of the lines are tighter than others, but yeah, you can see the kind of effect that we're going to go for. Okay, so it's something around about like so. Okay, like that. Turn on smooth shading, and you can see you get some very weird looking effects. So just make sure that you've also select, let's see, recalculate normals so they get them nice and smooth like that. Now to create that bracket, I'm just going to grab one of these endpoints right here, duplicate it, rotate it, and I'm going to drop one, just scale it down a little bit, extrude it like that, and let's also just rotate this one just to create this kind of bracket which is actually going to hold it onto the wall. So position it about there and make sure it's actually above that. Okay, so it's like that. Alright, and same with this bottom point here. Duplicate that. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to... There's a lot of duplicating in this tutorial, but it just saves time. Duplicate that there, and then we can leave that there. So now if we add an array point, an array modifier, making sure you clear the rotation, you could see that we get this kind of nice kind of wire looking effect. Now it's important that these brackets that you've got, one right here for example, particularly this endpoint here, that it doesn't overlap that point there like that. And the reason for that is that if you do that, then you'll see that the array modifier kind of cuts there. Because the way the array modifier works is it takes the very end point, the end vertice, and then the very start vertice and then the very end vertice, and then it places them end to end. So if this vertice is there, then it's going to use that endpoint, which is then going to make it look like it's all broken up. So make sure that it's, basically the line is the end vertice, like so. Cool. Alright, so I've got that set up. Let's jump back now to the first layer. I'm going to move it to the first layer, actually. Okay. Scaling it down. And I'm going to leave that origin point where it is, but I'm going to go into edit mode and then just move this up to the wall about there. Okay, so now if I turn up that array count, so it's going all the way to the end of the tunnel, and then I add a curve modifier, nurbs path, and make sure you turn up the array again all the way up to the end. Cool. And then I'm also going to add a mirror modifier as well. So mirror, make sure it's above the curve modifier, and now you've got them both going up the sides there. Now you don't want to have everything kind of symmetrical, like this side is identical to that side. So at the end of this you might want to apply one of the mirror modifiers and then go in and then shift these around a little bit so they're not identically aligned. But you can save that to the end because otherwise you can only click apply once basically, and then it's set in concrete pretty much. So I try and keep things right to the very end before I do stuff like that. I might just move that in slightly closer to the wall. Alright, that's cool. Alright, let's bring back the railroad now so we can see it. That railroad's looking a little bit out of scale too, so I'm just going to scale that down to about there and move that in a little bit. Which I think, because the clamps are just recurring a little bit too quickly, I'm just going to increase that scaling like that. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Alright, cool. So, now comes another part where we're going to add the lamps, okay? So, I said in this tutorial we're just going to be doing the modeling side of things, but we're also going to be adding the lamps as well, just because this is also ties in with modeling lamps, and we want the blender lamps, so the lamps that are actually going to light the scene, to also match up with the lamps that we're going to model. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this default lamp here, and I'm going to position it in the tunnel here just so it's on the wall, okay, like so. And I'm going to, holding down shift, I'm going to select that curve right there, hit Control P, and then select follow path, okay? So if I now select this lamp right here, well actually if I just hit Alt A right now, that lamp should now follow the follow the train track all the way down there. If I go to duplication, I'm going to turn on frames and make sure you uncheck speed, okay? And what that's done now is it has now duplicated that lamp on every single one of those frames all the way down to the end of the tunnel. Now I'm using this, you're probably wondering why I'm not using an array system. That's because with lamps you can't use arrays. So you'll notice there's no modifier stacker here. So unfortunately you can't use arrays with lamps. So kind of annoying, but that's just the way it is. So this is a way around that. This used to be the way you would do kind of things, like before the array system you would make the tube and make it follow duplicate, but they kind of fixed that up. But yeah, it's kind of an old-fashioned way of doing things, but it's the way to do it for lamps, at least currently anyway. So with this lamp selected, I'm also just going to just turn on sphere and set the distance to 3 just so we can see it a little bit better, and it'll light up our tunnel a bit better as well. Alright, cool. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to actually model the physical lamp, okay? So I'm going to jump over to a new layer again. Now the kind of the reference photo I'm going to use is actually this one right here. I'm not sure if you can see or not, but there's kind of a grill which is surrounding this lamp here on the side. So I want to sort of go for that look. Now it's not going to be very clear to the camera, so it doesn't, this kind of point isn't really like that essential to getting the lamp kind of modeled perfectly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a UV sphere, rotate it by 90 degrees, remove half of it, like so. Remove half of it again. Well, let's go vertices, okay. And then remove another half. Okay, so kind of like a magic trick. Cut it in half 3 times. Cool. Now I'm going to add a mirror modifier. Mirror, like that. And then turn on Z as well. Okay. Cool. Alright, so now we've got just this one segment here and it's making up half of this sphere. What I'm actually going to be modeling is that grill, okay? So if you have a look here, it's kind of that grill kind of shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cut that goes right here, another cut that goes right here, another cut that goes right here, and then another final cut that goes there. And I'm going to do the same for this segment going vertically. So I'm leaving kind of one point that's in between them, one sort of cut, whatever, kind of line there in between them, like so. And yeah, that should be fine. Okay, so now if I select these vertices, which are in the middle, like so, I'm sure there's other different, probably better ways of doing this method. This was just the way that I found worked, so that's why I'm doing it. So if I select all those vertices there, if I go to delete vertices, you can see we've got this nice grill looking effect. So I mean, it's not perfect, it's not, we're not, you know, getting it really accurate to a reference photo, but it's fine for what I want it to do. So I'm now going to go to scale and then type in scale Y, so scaling along the Y axis like this. If I type in 1.5, then you can see it's given it kind of an oblongated look there, if that's the right word, oblongated. All right. So I'm going to add another UV sphere here. Rotate it by 90 degrees. cut it in half again, and go to Y, then select 1.5, and then just scale it down slightly. You can see we've now got that inside that grill shape there. Okay, so pretty cool. Yeah, I'm going to give it a material, just really basic. Just give it an emit value of 1, just so that we can actually see it in relation to the rest of the scene. Okay, and I'm also going to just add a cube, and this is going to be kind of the point where the lamp is kind of sitting on, this kind of box where all the electrical parts are stored. I know, really technical, but it works. So that's going to be the box. So just go back to the modifier stacker here for this grill here, and just click apply for the mirror, just so that it's one solid object now. And now select that sphere and the cube, and then hit Control J, and that should be now one solid object. Unfortunately, it's using this one material. I only wanted that cylinder in the middle there, that sphere in the middle there to be that material. So I'm just going to add a new material here. Let's just make this black. Okay. Select one vertex from each of those, hit Control L, and then hit Assign. Okay. Alright. So that is one lamp. Okay. Let's jump back to the tunnel scene here. Going to rotate that by 90 degrees. And let's just position it about there. Now I would use an array system for this because I can, but because I want this to exactly line up with these lamps here, I'm going to do the exact same method I did for the lamps. So kind of that old-fashioned method, I'm going to do dupliverts. So with that lamp selected, going to select that curve going along the middle there. I'm going to hit Control P and select Follow Path. Okay, and then go here, duplication, frames, turn off speed, and it should now be lined up, provided this first one here is lined up with the lamp. It should be lined up perfectly with the rest of the scene. With the lamps themselves. Okay, move that about there. Should be perfect. Alright, cool. I'm going to add a mirror modifier, and I'm going to make this apply. Oh, yes, okay. The origin point needs to be on that center line there. So if I select that lamp, hit Control Alt Shift, and then hit origin to 3D cursor. Now if I add a mirror, make it apply, let's go rotation, to the x-axis, you can see that we've now got that lamp along the outside there, along the other side there, sorry. So you might be thinking that's a lot of lamps, and you're right. So actually, if I wanted to create less of them, what I would do is I would go to the I'm just moving this around while I'm talking. If I go here to the duplication option, if I select off, if I turn this number of off amount, basically that means every second or third frame it's going to place one. So the more I set that up, then the less lamps are actually visible. So I think for my scene I used off value of 3. And you're going to want to make sure you do the same for the lamps as well. They have the same off value. So yeah, that's how you get less of them showing up. And if you want the lamps on the other side of the tunnel as well, which I'm assuming you will because you want a realistic scene, just grab those lamps there, hit Shift D, duplicate it, and then drop it on the other side like so. Okay, and then also if you want to make sure those lamps share the same data, hold down Shift, select the other lamp, hit Control L, then select Object Data, and you'll see the lamps now have this 2 next to their name, which means they're now sharing the same data. So that's handy as well. Okay, cool. So, what have we got at the moment? Let's check it out, if I can grab it. Okay, cool. Alright, so the scene is almost complete. I'm going to create one final thing. Just for my scene, I found that it was kind of bare, just having the ceiling there with nothing on it. So, having a look at this reference photo here, there's nothing really along the ceiling at all. But I found that the ceiling looked quite bare. So what I did was I just added a plane, rotated it by 90 degrees, scaled it down considerably, positioned it on the ceiling like that, making sure it's quite small. Okay. And now, to make it follow and, well, duplicate it first of all, add an array system. And one thing with this, you'll note that if you set this to 1, or let's go 1, you'll notice that you can't actually see it. Like there's not 2 planes there. And if you set this to 10, you still can't see it, or 20, you still can't see it. That's because the plane is paper thin. So basically, it's trying to pile this really tiny, infinite, tiny number, and then scale it along 20, which is not doing anything. So you actually need to turn off relative offset and then turn on constant offset. So if I set this amount here to 50, then you'll notice that it's now actually appearing. So that's just one way to get around it. And I think I only really use that for planes, so that's just something to note. Okay, so I'm just increasing that count, and then going to curve, doing exactly what we did with the other ones, like so. So what I'm going to show you in the part 2 of the tutorial is I'm going to put like a little number on that, like a little texture, which is going to make it look like, you know, how trains have those kind of numbers along the top. So that's basically what that's going to be. I might just make this 100 just so it's not occurring too much. Yeah, I'd say that looks pretty good. Alright, so just so we can actually get a rendered scene here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly make just render this out, but just so that we can actually see the lamps, because the lamps are inside this physical lamp here, what I'm going to do is just select these materials for this lamp and just turn off traceable. As you know, for the black it needs to be turned on, but for the white material, turn off traceable. So basically what traceable does is it means that it's saying that yes, to use that material to cast a shadow. So if the lamp is inside it and it's trying to cast a shadow, you're not going to see any of the lamp coming out of it. So by turning off traceable, it means don't cast a shadow through that object. So that's why we turn it off. So just quick little announcement there. Okay. Alright, so making sure these are lined up. Okay. I'm also just very quickly going to just give it a soft size for this lamp here as well. Let's go 1.3, turn the samples up to 6, and I'm also going to turn on ambient occlusion, set it to multiply, maybe turn that down to 0.6, and the distance for this to 5. I'm really going into some advanced settings here. I just want to get some kind of finished result here just so I can render it out before we go to next week's segment. So let's render this now and see how it looks. Okay, so not bad. The railroad is actually lifted off the ground there, so I'm just going to quickly fix that now. Move that down there, and I might also just select these lamps here and turn off specularity just so it renders a little bit nicer. But there you go, guys. So that concludes part 1 of this tutorial. So just covering the basic modeling of our underground subway here. As you can see, really easy to create a very complex looking scene just by just sheerly using arrays and the curve modifier, and you can create a really advanced complex looking scene just by modeling a few different segments. So next week in our tutorial I'm gonna show you guys how to add those textures, the correct lighting, get kind of nice reflections off the floor, the railroad, things like that. So going to get into advanced texturing and lighting next week. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 and stay tuned for next week for part 2. So thanks for watching.